Hi everyone, Last Epoch has been out for a few days and I think that a lot of people are slowly getting into Endgame, so I want to talk about how to approach unlocking the empowered monoliths and what is the general idea when you do that. So after you finish the campaign, you're going to be in the end of time. In fact, you can go here before finishing the campaign and actually start the monoliths early, but I think that's generally a bad idea for at least newbies, so I would not recommend that unless you really know what you're doing. So finish the campaign, at least do the passive rewards and the idle slot rewards, and then try to gear up a character a little bit so that you are ready. So you're going to be somewhere at around level 50 or so by the time that you finish the campaign most of the time. Maybe a bit higher if you do more side quests or just, like farm more XP in general. And then you are ready to go for those monoliths. So you see here that there are 10 different timelines, and you have, like, your main objective is to go up here to those top 3 timelines, because once you have completed all these 3, you will unlock the empowered monoliths, and this is where the real endgame starts. The normal monoliths, they're basically just an extension of the campaign, I would say. So you just go through them and they kind of like, go higher and higher in levels. So you see here these these zone levels. The left side are the normal monolith levels and the right side are the empowered monolith levels. So in empowered, basically everything is like equalized to level 100. So you have a kind of like a streamlined difficulty. But on the left side is kind of like the quest monoliths, basically, where you progress through the early end game towards the empowered. Now the thing is, you can actually choose different paths here, and you can choose to either go slower or you can go faster. And I would generally recommend the faster track here. So while I don't recommend skipping the campaign too much, I do recommend to go up to the empowered as fast as possible. Of course, maybe your build is weak, or maybe you just need to grind out a few more levels, a bit more gear. You can do more, but I would just generally recommend to go the right side, because this leads you to the empowered monoliths much quicker. Because if you go right, you do this one here, you have to complete the first one, and then you can choose left or right, you go this one, and then you have again kind of this choice here to either jump to this one or this one. And you see here that there's basically higher jumps in the levels. So it starts at 58, then there's 66, there's 75, and if you go to the left side, there's like 62 and 70, and then 80. And in fact, you have to do one extra round of a monolith, basically, if you go to the left side, before you can go up here to this one, the Reign of Dragons. So after completing the Reign of Dragons, you unlock all 3 of these, and then you can go and do all these level 90 monoliths. And after you have finished those level 90 monoliths, then you have to go, there's like here, you can actually walk there from like one of these waypoints to the middle. And there's like some object, you have to click it, and this unlocks the empowered timelines. The thing is also that if you go to the right side, you also gain more character power, because there are these blessings that you get from completing each timeline. Every time you defeat one of those quest bosses, you get a choice of a blessing. You get either 4 or 5. And like this, you also gain a bit of a scaling a curve basically with a character. So at the start, the best one here to get is, for example, the experience. This one otherwise just has like a bunch of like extra drop blessings or so. So it's not really too relevant, but the experience is nice if you get it. But you see here, there's actual stats that you can get from those blessings here. This is, for example, crit multi, and then, there's a bunch of different stats you can choose. Each monolith has their own 10 different blessings. And there are those that give you character power, and there are those that give you more drops. So this is a character power monolith, and the left side is the drop monolith, basically. So you don't care too much about these at the start anyway. This is something for later when you try to like more min-max and gear up in the end game. You can kind of like, choose, okay, I need more rings, I need more amulets, for example, in case you are getting unlucky with some of those drops. But this is something that you can get later in the empowered monoliths. So going the right side also gives you this extra power. You see the same here. There's, for example, a mana thing. There's also one with, for example, lightning res here in the ending the storm timeline, for example. And then here's like a big one with the crit avoidance and so on. And here's the armor. And this is a drop one. And here's another defensive one here that I have. So there is these timelines that give you actual stats. And this is those that you want to prioritize first. And they're all here on the right side, as you can see. So this, and this. In the left side here, there's like extra shard drop rates, extra item drop rates, extra, this and that drop. So this is not really too relevant early on. In fact, when I was progressing my characters, usually I kind of just like left out these left side monoliths for a long time, and I mostly focused on getting to the empowered. And then once I was in the empowered, I would actually go back to maybe, you know, some of those earlier timelines like this one, and actually try to get the grand blessing, because the empowered monoliths, the level 100 ones, they also give you these higher tier blessings basically. So you can go back and actually get a better version of these. So I wouldn't really like overdo it at the start to try to like farm out, like grind out the perfect blessing right at the start. This can take a long time. Like you can do one of these timelines like 20 times or something and still not have a perfect blessing that you want. But just going in there, getting, you know, something decent, and then moving on, getting something decent somewhere else, and so on. And then I would like focus on these other drop monoliths basically. Now, one thing to note here is that the jump from normal monoliths to empowered monoliths is pretty significant. In fact, I think it's probably the most significant jump in difficulty that you're going to experience at any point with your character, because you also start adding corruption to your monoliths. So if you go here, basically in normal monoliths there's 0 corruption. You can stack up corruption by defeating Oribus, but ultimately you don't really do that. You basically just like, you know, rush through the normal version of these monoliths, and there's no corruption here. But if you go to the empowered ones, you have minimum 100 corruption, giving monsters plus 60% more damage and health. So on top of them being level 100 instead of level 90, they also have that, and you can kind of expect like a pretty steep curve there once you start adding corruption to those monoliths. So depending on how strong or how weak you feel, you might want to take it a bit slow with the corruption. In case you didn't know, corruption always gets added when you defeat Oribus, and you can also reduce corruption again. So in case it's too hard, you can actually go here. This is always right next to the start. It's always attached here. You can run the Sanctuary of Terra, and you can reduce the corruption again. However, you cannot go below 100. So 100 is just the minimum corruption that you have to deal with at any point. But in case you want to try to push corruption higher and higher as fast as possible, the general idea is that you make like a large web and you try to like push outwards from the center. You always start in the center here, which is a monolith, and then you try to push outwards here to the side. And on the outer ring, basically, you're gonna find Oribus. And then you can also defeat these bosses again. There's these timeline bosses. Every time you unlock the third quest echo, basically, you can fight the boss. And usually the strategy is that you fight the boss most of the time twice, maybe sometimes 3 times. And then you do Oribus, because you get extra corruption by first defeating the quest boss and then doing Oribus. But again, this depends a little bit on like the state of your character and the state of your build. Maybe you're too weak, maybe you can't really just go up in corruption. So if you have a strong build, then you can do that. Otherwise, you can definitely perfectly stay in a bit lower corruption. It's not really such a big downside. Now there is this experience modifier that you can get here. So I'm going to show this. Here on the bottom left, you can see the rarity modifiers and the experience modifiers, and they scale both with the corruption and also with these mods that you get on the echoes. So you see this here on the right. So there is a new enemy modifier, so they get stronger in some way. And also there's this item rarity and item increased experience gain. And depending on what you choose, you get more or less. But ultimately, I would recommend to mostly focus on just running the right echoes. So whatever that means for your character, but you know, you can kind of target farm certain things. It's not bad, for example, early on to just stack up on runes and glyphs. So you see here there's like runes, and here's glyphs. So it just gives you a bit of like a, you know, like a stock to craft items, which is pretty important basically all the way. Especially early on, you want to like just try to like, you know, make some decent rare items and stuff. And then you can also maybe try to target certain items that you need. So actually every single reward here right now is glyphs or gold or something. But, you know, you can get like, you know, exalted helmets, exalted weapons, and you can kind of like target some of these things. Or what's also good for leveling up, at least later on, like post level 94 or so, are these experience tomes. So I really recommend to go for these. But yeah, in general, you kind of like, you know, push outwards, do the corruption, and then, you know, it resets the web when you do Oribus, and then you start again, basically. And like this, you push up the corruption. Now, one thing to note here about the corruption is also that each timeline has its own corruption counter, basically. So there's 10 different timelines, and you kind of want to grind out some of them a bit more and some of them a bit less, depending on the drops, depending on the layouts. So each of them have their own maps, each of them have their own boss, they have their own boss loot. You can see that on the Maxwell guides. So there is actually the monolith page here. I'm going to show this real quick in case you're wondering, what a certain boss looks like and what the boss drops. So if you go here to monolith, you can actually click on these things. There's a boss guide, here's the last ruin guide, the spirits of fire guide, etc. So there's this interactive map, you can click on them. And you can also see like if there's, for example, a certain unique item that drops only from this boss and these kind of things. So some of them are more relevant for your build than others. But in the grand scheme of things, you want to try to push the corruption. And if you push the corruption in one of these monoliths, then you get a bit of a catch-up mechanic for the others. So while the corruption here is tied to a specific monolith, if you have, let's say, 300 corruption in this timeline, and then you go to another one that has 100, that is like, fresh and untouched, then the first time you defeat Orbis, you're gonna get like a massive chunk of bonus or corruption. So you get like, I don't know, plus 100 or something. So it depends also like with the distance from the center. So the further out you go, the more you get. This is like a general rule basically, also for the stability to like unlock the quest echoes much faster. But you can actually catch up really fast. And you don't necessarily have to go to like exactly the same corruption immediately. You can just, do a timeline like twice and you're going to be kind of similar to your highest. And from then on, you can also push higher in another timeline, for example. One important thing to note here is also that each of the timelines has their own like exclusive rewards. You can see this here. So once you have unlocked the empowered monoliths, you actually have this choice between normal and empowered. And well, you always go empowered anyway. And then you also have these exclusive rewards here. So you see, for example, this first timeline, it gives you more weapons. So there's like swords, axes, daggers, whatever. And then if you go to another timeline, let's say you go up here, then it gives you like another reward in that timeline. So each of those timelines has like a higher chance to drop certain uniques and certain set items. So you see here, this is like helmets and shields, for example. And this is the same for all the others. So you can kind of just check. And well, you have to decide, okay, do you want to farm the blessing? Do you want to farm, certain uniques in that timeline? Do you want to farm the boss for a certain boss drop? And like this, you can kind of like, go around this map and kind of like, okay, complete this step, complete that step, and slowly gear up your character with all the stuff that you want. And another thing to note here is also that once you are in empowered timelines, I think you can be a lot stricter with the kind of loot that you're showing on your filter. So in case you're making your own filter, I would definitely recommend that once you start empowered, you should make it a lot more strict and just, show more exalted, show less rares. So for example, I'm going to show you like what kind of filter I have here for my endgame Falconer build that I made. And basically here at the start, I always show like stuff that I want to shatter for shards. So some rare shards, for example, like all the class specific stuff that can roll on chests. I have this here, but right now I turn this off because I already did this way too much. And some other stuff that is like kind of rare that I use for crafting, like hybrid health and these kind of things. So I always show this first. I show the uniques and the sets. And then here, for example, at the top, I show basically all of the GG items that I want to get, like exalted, only the best bases basically, with certain exalted stats that I really want. So I have this here basically for every single slot. Then I have, for example, bases for Runes of Ascendancy in case I want to gamble for the unique. I hide all of the off-class items. I hide all of the exalted that have any stat that I don't want. I show the experimental stuff I want. And then we also have basically under this GG stuff that is like recolored to red, which is like, big, important, color. I also have other exalteds that I show here that, for example, have tier 7 mods of stuff I want, but may not be the best base. And for example, here I had some other filters as well that I disabled at this point, but just like more exalted items, but a bit of a bigger range, not just the GG types only with like the perfect stats, but a bit more, open. So this is something that I used earlier when I was like early in empowered basically, and gearing up, level 80, level 90 and stuff. But at some point your gear is just gonna get better and better, and you're looking for more and more like GG items basically. And you're just making the filter more strict. And same thing here, for example, idols. At the start, I show idols that have any of the good stats. The special resistances are really nice to get to your idols early on. And then later on, I just turn this off, and I only have idols on my filter that have, a good prefix and a good suffix. And at this point, I have like 100 idols like this lying around. like this, basically it goes down here. And for example, further down here, this is stuff I used way earlier when I was like, you know, level 70, 80 or so, just hitting empowered. And this actually shows like, you know, just decent bases of even rare items with, you know, like 2 good stats, for example. So I have a filter like this here, where, you know, I just try to like gather like rare items early on. And like this, I show relatively little on my filter, and you can like, you know, easily like switch this on and off depending on, you know, okay, I got everything, but I'm still missing amulets really badly. So I just turn this on again, for example, until you find one, and then you turn it off, and then you know, have like these higher rules superseding the lower rules. So it will always, you know, go for, you know, the juicy stuff first, and then kind of the less juicy stuff, and then kind of like the earlier stuff here. So this is kind of like how I set up these filters and how you progress your gear and your character as you go. So this is the general strategy of how to approach the end game, how to get to empowered monoliths. Also, don't really worry if you're like really under leveled. This is kind of normal. So especially if you go this right side here on your monoliths and you kind of leave out the left side. As I mentioned, if you kind of like, you know, just straight up push up here to the empowered monoliths, you are really under leveled. You're gonna hit empowered by level 75 to 80 or something, because you don't really have that many echoes to do. It's like they actually reduce the amount of stability you need to get to the quest echoes in the early monoliths. So you can just like basically unlock the boss, do the 3 quest echoes, go next, unlock the boss, do the 3 quest echoes, go next, and so on. And you don't care about Orbis, you don't care about any of that stuff in the normal timelines. And then once you're empowered, this is where the grind begins. This is where you start pushing corruption, where you do the Orbis, and where you farm out the good blessings, and so on. So the main recommendation is just that once you hit empowered, try to take it a bit easy. Try to maybe look for, you know, for example, also echoes that don't really make monsters really too dangerous, for example. So you have stuff here like, you know, high health enemies deal 25% increased damage. That's like an okay mod. But sometimes there's like mods like monsters are deadly, which is like, for example, a really, really rough mod. But, you know, just trying to stack up more of these, like, for example, defensive mods that enemies can get. For example, here, 30% extra health is usually not all too bad. So you can also kind of like min-max a little bit your runs, depending on how powerful your character is, either offensively or defensively, and also try to hunt down more of those modifiers that actually don't hurt you all that much early on, until you get stronger and you're more comfortable in the empowered monoliths. But you see this here, for example, there's like some of those modifiers that don't really do all that much. Like here it says rare enemies have 50% increased cooldown recovery speed. That's kind of whatever. And you know, like, you know, enemies have 30% health, and like enemies have 30% endurance. Like this stuff doesn't really matter most of the time, I would say. But there's, for example, other stuff like the deadly mod. It can appear in certain timelines. It doesn't appear in all of the timelines. So each of the timelines also has like, you know, the individual echo modifiers in some cases. So for example, this deadly mod doesn't necessarily appear, but you have these different things here. But there's also, for example, one here, like rare enemies have high speed and crit chance until approached. This is, for example, also kind of like a dangerous one that you might want to skip early on if you're, you know, a bit weak, for example. And so like this, you can kind of like, you know, push outwards, pay a bit of attention to what you're taking here, maybe try to gear up by, you know, choosing the right rewards. And like this, you can actually, you know, gear up your character really fast and relatively safely. Last thing, in case you weren't aware of this, if you are in the empowered monoliths, you do no longer have to do the quest echoes 1 and 2, you only have to do the boss. So every timeline is structured in the same way. You have 2 quest echoes and then the boss quest echo. And in empowered, those are optional. So you only have to do the boss, and usually they are hidden. So it says optional quest echoes. You can do them once you unlock this stability here. So you see this. If you like, you know, run echoes, you rank up this stability. So you see at the top, plus 21 to 65, depending on how much bonus stability you get. So it also shows you how far you're gonna get with your bar here. And then as you run more and more echoes, especially further away from the center, you get more stability. And then you try to unlock, you know, number 1, number 2, and number 3. Those are those 3 quest echoes here. And in empowered, the only one you care about is the 3rd one. And then you do the boss, and then you can repeat. So this is kind of how that works. In the normal timelines, you have to do those quest echoes at least once, and then do the boss, and then move on. But later on, you can skip that, which is really nice. Also, about the bonus stability, you can kill more monsters in an individual echo to get more bonus stability. So this is why it has this range of 23 to 271, for example, because it says here in the bottom right on the echo rewards, you can see 23 time stability, that's like the baseline that you get for completing, and then you get up to 48 bonus stability in this one, depending on how many enemies you defeat. So if you full clear this entire thing, you're gonna get, you know, like 70 or something. And if you just rush the objective and do nothing else, you get to 23. Usually you kind of just fight your way through to the objective and rush the objective, but, you know, get a bit of extra bonus. You want to get a bit of XP, you want to get a bit of loot as well, of course. And in that case, you get a bit of bonus ability, but it's not a priority. So this is really just a bonus. So take it as that. But if you're, for example, close to finishing, you know, the unlock for the last quest echo, you can actually look at how much exact bonus ability you need in order for you to hit that quest echo. So this is something like of a bit of a min-maxing that you can do there. But in the grand scheme of things, just rush the objective every single time, no matter what. And, you know, this is true early on, this is true later on, you always rush the objective. However, one thing to note here as well is that if you don't rush the objective and actually full clear maps, you're going to get a lot more loot in those maps, you're going to get more XP, so you can kind of like level up more. And also you're going to stack up fewer of those modifiers, basically. So the more like bonus ability you get, for example, you can kind of like, you know, push towards, for example, the boss, and have fewer modifiers active when you fight the boss, because those modifiers also affect, you know, Oribus. Those modifiers affect the quest echoes. So, for example, right before you fight the boss, you might want to do like a longer echo run, for example, get more bonus ability, because then you have, you know, fewer modifiers active most of the time. And that's also it for this video. So I hope this helps you out when you start out in the end game. Personally, I've had a blast with Last Epoch so far. So this is currently my offline character because the servers are down. But I'm level 100 on my hardcore rogue. It's really fun. And you're gonna see more stuff from me. So stay tuned for that. Hope you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you guys next time.